Challenges us to respond. He's going to talk for finished promptly at 1:45, and there are refreshments next door. Thank you very much, Tara and team, for arranging those, and all are welcome to those for you to mix and exchange emails and contacts. And those who want to, I'd be very keen to encourage that you follow that up. I have to disappear promptly at about 1:45, so please excuse the fact that I won't be able to do as much mingling as I would normally do, but there'll be plenty of others to do that, led by Tara. Blessed, over to you. Thank you very, very much for being here. Thank you. Away you go.
Thank you very much, London South University, for having me. I'm going to deliver a lecture on the cost of freedom of expression, human rights for individuals in the prevailing demise of democracy in my country. Chancellor, Vice Chancellor, the Provost, Deans, local leadership, the Mayor, heads of departments, students, lecturers, ladies and gentlemen. Very sure of protocol, but if there are any those that I've left, my apologies, my sincere apologies. I'm a journalist, and as a journalist, our craft is on. Now, why do I stand before you, ladies and gentlemen, on 20 February this year at the United Nations Human Rights Headquarters in Geneva? I spoke at the NGO Summit, where after delivering what I felt was a heartfelt speech on my personal experiences as a prisoner of conscience in Zimbabwe, my world came crashing down on me. My life as I knew it was altered. The path, the plans, which I had all under control, as I thought, today hangs in the balance of a threat which for me remains too chilling to contemplate. Following my speech, the government of Zimbabwe, through the current have to be thrown into. Yes. He spoke on National Time News, and his speech was carried on the front page of the state-controlled newspaper, The Herald. That's deserving to be punished. Political party ZANU-PF took to social media to attack me, issuing a statement on national TV. Some of the chilling posts by this group of ZANU-PF activists, formerly known in Zimbabwe as Varakashi, people who beat up, loosely translated, a firing squad. Others wanted me simply to be beaten, demanded that my passport be withdrawn. Mind you, I had been arrested a year before on allegations of broadcasting material which the state deemed would incite violence. As my lawyer was later to say in court, I had been arrested simply for practicing journalism. I was then kept in pre-trial detention for 73 days. I was kept in prison in a hellhole and fed food no dogs would touch. Slept on the cold, hard floor with little to no bedding, while my undernourished body was tormented by an army of insatiable lies. During my time there, my body gave into a terrible, violent cough. My spirit was shaken. The experience was traumatic. For prison, dear friends, is a dark place that feeds on the soul through deprivation, abuse, and separation from loved ones. It is therefore without fear of self-contradiction that I say, I know the threat that awaits me if I return to Zimbabwe today. The chilling threats by Minister Jem come on top of charges that are still active. This is one of the state of Zimbabwe's tactics. They arrest without just cause, drag out a frivolous and vexatious trial just to ensure human rights defenders and journalists who dare speak truth to power are kept in check. I am not the only one, and surely I know I will not be the last. Indulge me, ladies and gentlemen, as I put color to the charges that my government and all its might preferred against me. Well, the allegations include that I broadcast a press conference where a veteran of Zimbabwe's liberation struggle, Blessed Geza, not Blessed Mhlanga, they just got the wrong Blessed, I think, had called on President Emmerson Mnangagwa to leave office and stop his incredulous attempts to change the constitution so that he could extend his stay in power. The state argued that the words said by Blessed Geza, not Blessed Mhlanga, during the press conference were intended to incite violence against the president. I was arrested, ladies and gentlemen, over words said by someone, not me, broadcast on a TV channel owned by someone else, not me, and at a press conference that I had not even attended. So up to this day, I do not know how I managed that feat. We all know, those of us who have read the Bible, Jesus performed miracles. But in all his miracles, he never performed one in his absence. I do not know how I would have outdone our Lord and mighty Jesus Christ. The important point, however, is even if I had attended the press conference, are journalists responsible for words that are said by political players during live TV? If this approach is not a threat to journalism, I don't know what is. Blessed Geza himself had to self-exile, where he continued to challenge Mnangagwa's constitutional coup until he sadly died in February of this year in South Africa. Blessed Geza was a top-ranking member of the ruling ZANU-PF elite. He was now being hunted by his fellow comrades who he helped get into power. Mnangagwa and his supporters have ruthlessly continued on the path of power retention at whatever cost. This has included open bribery of members of parliament, the arrest and detention or a brutal assault on anyone opposed to Constitutional Amendment number 3. Now, Zimbabwe is going through an attempt to change its constitution through what is called CAB 3 or Constitutional Amendment number 3. The idea is to change the constitution, which initially gave any candidate or any sitting president at least 2 5-year terms. And thereafter, you cannot run as a president again. 2 5-year terms. So the first term, and if you are re-elected, you can enjoy a second term, right? More like the American system. But President Emmerson Mnangagwa, knowing that his final 5-year term expires in 2028, has gone in an attempt to change that constitution so that he stays beyond the constitutional required 5-year term. So he has proposed to extend his term of office from 5 years to 7 years. He's also proposed through that constitutional amendment to have massive control of the judiciary. As we speak now, that amendment sits in his office awaiting his signature, so that once he signs it, it becomes law, giving himself a fresh 7-year term of office without even going to elections. And anyone who has been seen to oppose, including some of us journalists who have written and exposed the lies that are carried in the Constitutional Amendment Act, have become his targets. Let me give you context as to who I am. Blessed Mhlanga is a father of 3. Halfway through my law degree at the University of Zimbabwe, employed as digital editor and head of broadcasting at Alpha Media Holdings, Zimbabwe's biggest independent media house. My future and that of my children was pretty set, as I think I had scaled to the apex of journalism in my country. Yet as a price of practicing public interest journalism, I've become a target of Mhlanga, the crocodile as he is known. I've come to an unenviable position of being forced to abandon years of hard work, passion, and love, and go into hiding or face certain imprisonment or even assassination. Some might think I'm a coward for abandoning my battle station at a time when good public interest journalism is still needed in my country. I am a man of flesh and blood, prone to fear, and with hindsight, aware of the brutality that the government of Zimbabwe is capable of, and the things that I have suffered in pre-trial incarceration in Zimbabwe's prison halls, I'm best advised to stay away and keep my voice so that I can speak for those who can't speak for themselves who are in Zimbabwe, so that I can bring hope to my country. So today, I'm here not out of fear, but out of hope that one day light will win against darkness. Even as I stand here, I battle with the thought of what I've lost, the effect on my children, and that now my future is uncertain. I close the door at night, ladies and gentlemen, wondering if I'll ever recover from this shock. There is a heavy price that journalists across the world pay for reporting what they witness, uncover through investigative journalism, and what is said and done by those in power. And the burden must not be carried by us journalists alone. Therefore, I wish to thank you, London South Bank University, for giving me this opportunity to speak here today. Zimbabwe, since the coup of 2017, has sunk deep into being a pariah state, where the law has now become a tool of oppression and sovereignty, a cover for abuse of state apparatus against own citizens. In many cases, the law has been weaponized, the judiciary compromised, and the prisons turned into tools of punishment before trial by leaders we ostensibly elected and who took oath to defend and protect the people by upholding the Constitution. You, here in the UK, have an independent judiciary system, a luxury that many of us in Zimbabwe do not have. In Zimbabwe, the main difference is that 46 years after achieving freedom from colonialism, the people of Zimbabwe have become oppressed by their own leaders. Zimbabwe has not been othered, as in the US, where citizenship has been called into question, even for those born there. But in Zimbabwe, we have been divided by those seeking to hold on to power, those seeking political gains through association, and those who use fear to govern. Where opposition politics is simply not tolerated, despite dialogue and deals for a coalition government of national unity in 2013, which we all hoped would be a turning point for our country, this has not held. The coup that many of us, including myself, celebrated as it removed Robert Gabriel Mugabe, then we thought that we were turning a new page. Alas, we have sunk deeper into oblivion. What these guys, the leaders of today, are doing in Zimbabwe would make Mhlanga Mugabe look like a toddler. So we need to ask how the rise of so-called strongman politics has been supported, and by who, funded and grown like bindweed, putting at risk global peace and security. Just last week, and ongoing in South Africa, a series of marches happened against other Africans living and working there. Malawians, Zimbabweans, Ghanaians, Nigerians, and other nationalities were, and some are still being held in detention centers until they can be bussed back to their respective countries. Many point to the misinformation on social media as responsible for these divisions, which have ultimately manifested into violence. And they see it as having played a key role in stroking divisions in the same manner that radio broadcasts in Rwanda contributed to the genocide of 1994. The role of government and those behind these messages of divisions must be interrogated and those behind held to account. What to me this shows is that journalism today is more important than ever. For without independent but accountable media, the free-for-all misinformation and propaganda becomes the mechanization of the spread of hate and a divided people. As we have seen here in the UK through Brexit, how divisions work in putting our countries back. Without credible sources of information, without some kind of accountability, misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda becomes another form of warfare by the powerful against ordinary citizens. My point is that an independent but accountable media is key to democracy and is part of the institutional foundation of any free society. It has to work in balance with other accountability mechanisms, such as the independent judiciary, a government elected in regulated processes by its citizens, and a public service which is also accountable through legislation, policy, and fair practices. In Zimbabwe, we see disproportionate use of force to spread and harvest fear. For instance, in April this year, university students Takunda Muka and his colleagues were arrested on allegations of breaking a window. This was just an excuse, ladies and gentlemen. As we all know, it was because the Students' Union in Zimbabwe mobilized and opposed what they called a coup against the constitution of Zimbabwe by its own government. Led by the ZANU-PF, who in 2023 got into power through elections that were declared shambolic and far from free or fair by SADC and EU observer missions. This same government is now seeking to change the nation's constitution in an elect pact led by illegitimate representatives of the people. The 4 university students were held in pre-trial prison for over 2 months. No bail was granted, which is a gross violation of our constitution. Last October, an opposition activist, Godfrey Karembe, was arrested and had to spend 8 months in pre-trial detention, despite the state failing to present a prima facie case against him. The state opposed bail and the courts complied, leaving Karembera at the mess of an 8-month jail term pre-trial, only to be acquitted, but punishment had already been meted on him. Like me, journalist Opo Chungono spent 80 days in pre-trial detention for a crime that did not even exist in our statutes. I mean, he was arrested. There was no crime. He went to court and said, but this what I've been arrested for is not a crime. After 80 days, the court agreed and said, there's no crime. And he was released. Emmerson Mnangagwa, in just 7 years as president, has jailed more people for free speech than the late President Robert Mugabe did in 40 years in power. And on his path to absolute power retention, Mnangagwa has attacked two critical institutions in Zimbabwe. These are free press and the judiciary. Those who toe the line get rewarded through loans that are not paid back, luxury cars, and other trinkets, as opposed to those who don't play ball, who are thrown into the fringes and or fired from the bench or exiled from their country. As a law student, forced to abandon my studies midway, I've come to learn that for democracy to thrive, an independent judiciary is far more important than the other pillars of the state. The question is, how can judges be appointed, protected, and able to play their rightful role in democratic societies and states? Sadly, in Zimbabwe, the Zimbabwe Constitutional Amendment number 3 assaults the integrity of the noble lords and ladies who walk the halls of justice in my country. The UK has a unique approach that has lessons for the rest of the world through the Judicial Appointments Commission. Because ensuring that institutions remain independent is a role that we all need to play, especially citizens of countries. Because, ladies and gentlemen, when checks and balances become ceremonial, democracy is eroded. Social order as we know it becomes chaotic. Everyone is then at risk, even those who are the architects of the laws that risk and erode the democracy. I say this because the last Foreign Affairs Minister of President Robert Gabriel Mugabe, Walter Mzembe, was to endure 8 months of pre-trial detention in Zimbabwe when they were removed from power. The same laws that they used to oppress others were used on them. So even if you're in power today, you must ensure that you make a country, a state, a place that even when you are not in power, you'll be able to live in peacefully and without fear. What we have seen in Zimbabwe is an extractive state that cares not about the development of its people, no. Instead, some of our leaders, when they fly into the UK, they see the working public transport infrastructure. They see the good things and infrastructure that have been built here in the UK. They do not aspire to build it in Zimbabwe. They simply say to themselves, my kids will come here. Which pains me a lot. Corruption has become a pandemic, and the flaunting of wealth by the haves in the face of absolute lack is now in fashion in Zimbabwe. Nothing could have ever prepared us for these levels of human rights abuses that we see today in Zimbabwe. For all his particular failings, and some would say human rights evils, such as the appalling and evil Gukurahundi genocide in the 1980s, which remains an open wound today, years after Mugabe's death. Mugabe allowed civil society to operate in Zimbabwe. He left judicial independence unmolested. And while there was corruption under his presidency, it was not as brazen, crass, and naked as it is in today's Zimbabwe. Poverty levels are on the increase. Teachers are asking parents to pay additional monies or their children are not taught. So you pay your school fees, but when your child goes to school, you've got to pay the teacher an extra something so that he teaches your children. Otherwise, You will just sit and say, hello, kids. Then after 2 hours, bye-bye, kids. And your children will not learn anything. This we did not see in Mugabe's Zimbabwe. Doctors, nurses, and other professionals who are not politically connected or supporters of the government can't speak out or get decent paying jobs in my country. They have been forced to live in search of liberty and a better living abroad. We continue trying to contribute to a better Zimbabwe, as well as the communities that we find ourselves in. In the UK, I've experienced the help from others who came before me for similar reasons, and support from British citizens who know our shared history, as well as the challenges journalists and democratic activists face. Without doubt, I regularly question myself, did I miscalculate to stand with the truth and believe in free speech? Will I ever recover from the shocks and the cost of being a journalist in Mhlanga, Zimbabwe? Is there a future for a South and a Southern Africa with peace and security? These are the questions that I ask myself. And for now, I have no answers. But let me explore, Chancellor said, the second part of today's question. How can we better respond to these challenges at home and abroad? Dear colleagues, the people of Zimbabwe need your solidarity, your voices and funding. For without international community, unarmed and peace-loving Zimbabweans are rendered helpless, and voiceless against a regime that believes in the use of hard power to manufacture forced consensus. The ongoing attempt by the government to change the constitution to give an extended term of office to the president has been anchored on an attempt to criminalize free speech, freedom of association, while subverting the independence of institutions, judicial and even academic institutions. All recognize the signs of a democracy in demise. Human rights become the first casualty of a dictatorship, because a state that rules by inducing fear on its people will not uphold human rights. I therefore posit that fighting for democracy, a free press, and human rights isn't one tactic. It's three interlocking fronts: building of institutions, providing accurate information, and demanding accountability of those who make decisions of our country. There must be regulation of power, because absolute power is dangerous. As John Edward, a respected English historian and moralist, once wrote, power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Great men are almost always bad men, even when they exercise influence and not authority. Close quote. This is true whether that is at local levels, the clinic, the school, the municipality council, or at national levels. The police, electoral processes, auditing, and finance reporting. On all these fronts, accountability and independence form a tight balance and are a key. And in all these fronts, we, the people, have a role to play. The British government trades with Zimbabwe, but like other European governments, sadly, they have prioritized products over people. What can be bought and what can be sold, while the impact on the people who produce are often neglected. Of course, they're in competition with other global nations for minerals or for markets for their goods. It can be hard to hold supply chains to account when you fear you will lose access to lithium, for instance, if you ask the question, why innocent people are being jailed without a trial. China doesn't ask these questions. Does it mean that the British should not ask? Yes, diplomacy is an art, but it cannot be ignorant of the impact on Zimbabwean citizens, especially when the income or investment from trade is routed through the banks of London and its finance houses. My ask is that you, as the citizens of the free world, demand that your governments prioritize people and not products. Regimes which do not respect their own people must not be tolerated. Because where you prioritize people, you receive better products, you receive better quality, and you also see that nations that surround you, Zimbabwe included, will only engage in migration as a matter of choice and not necessity. You cannot, for all intents and purposes, tell a man who is running away from his burning house to go back to his home without first helping him to put out the flames in his home. Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, in Zimbabwe, the arsonist is the one who owns the fire brigade. The drying up of funding to civil society supporting Zimbabwean institutions has been detrimental to the survival of democracy in Zimbabwe. Our country has produced some of the finest jurists whose fidelity to the law drove me to want to study it. They are fine men and women who populate those benches. They need your protection. They need our protection so that they execute their duties with justice as determined by their training and not the politics of the day. Legal to legal solidarity across Europe to Zimbabwe is happening, but we need a new agency and more routes for collaboration. If I was to hazard, I would call upon setting up an institution that will always ensure that any judge who is targeted or fired in any country whilst dispensing justice must and will be protected. Once the judges know that, they will not fear doing their work. Public interest journalists must be supported everywhere because the absence of accountable information in a democracy is sure to hasten its demise. We must be able to protect those who sacrifice their lives and families to ensure the general populace are informed. The burden I carry today and the opportunities that I have lost because I dared use my voice to speak for others cannot be carried by me alone. I am too fragile and too poorly equipped to survive it. I need you. So do others. Because where human rights defenders are supported, the spirit of reclaiming space is kept alive. Hope is kept alive. For who are we? Who are we without hope of a better tomorrow where our children can thrive and live in peace? Europe cannot welcome rogue leaders to the halls of trade and diplomacy on the red carpets, while their diaspora are treated as second-class citizens or even illegal immigrants. Because they fled dictatorships enabled by Europe's silence, for instance, in Darfur, Eritrea, DRC, Tigray, Syria, women now in Afghanistan. The list is long, and my fear is it's endless. Dictators must know that they will be held accountable for their actions. When I say they must be held accountable for their actions, the easiest thing that many have thought of is sanctions. But sanctions do not generally work. The high cost of sanctions are simply passed to the ordinary and oppressed who cannot survive them. Yet the same people who will be leading this dictatorship, when they get sick, they fly to your hospitals. They send their children to these amazing schools that you have built. And they do not deliver at home and cry sanction. I propose, dear Chancellor, that financial monitoring and restrictions of money laundering can be part of accountability. That as leaders sit in the halls with each other, they are honest and truthful and speak out against the oppression of people. We must, like we did during apartheid in South Africa, put a cost on oppression, support people-to-people relations, university to university, rather than increasing bilateral relations without accountability. I mean, I was just reading here in the UK, as citizens, your collective voices matter. It is amazing to me that if 100,000 people sign a petition in the UK, Parliament must take time to debate it. That's powerful, maybe symbolic, but still powerful. So, for instance, could a petition ask the government of the UK to review human rights and freedom of speech in Zimbabwe? I mean, this matters to the regime because, for instance, Zimbabwe would like to be admitted back into the Commonwealth. That cannot be permitted while basic freedoms are crushed. Symbolic, but powerful. Because the UK government influences the decision, and the Commonwealth is supposed to reflect common values across former British colonies. As the democratic space closes in Zimbabwe and in other parts of Africa, sometimes linked to the rise of investment influence from China and the BRICS alliance, the UK and Europe hold a balance of power to arrest a decline in freedom. Now, more than ever, we can see oppression in one state directly affects others. Russia on Ukraine, the US on Iran, and Latin America, Gaza and occupied territories. Refugees from a war on citizens affecting the whole region and dividing communities here in the UK. In closing, I posit, Chancellor said, sovereignty does not mean governments have the rights to oppress their citizens without the consent of the global village. The only thing standing between chaos and crisis anyway is the ability for people to know what is happening, who is accountable, and to demand that their governments take action which leads to peace and security for all. We have seen the playbook in use in the US. We have seen how independent journalism is lost to billionaire-owned platforms. And we have seen how rogue governments shut down dissent. The Commonwealth members plus Europe may constitute the final frontier to show up the rule of international law. But these governments need to know that you, the people, want them to take a stand. I look forward to our discussion now. Thank you for giving me your ear.
So thank you very much for a very powerful personal testimony and call to arms, which I hope we've all not just heard but taken account of. And so three very brief things, then open it up to questions and comments, and then we'll formally stop just after 1:45, but the conversation can carry on next door for those who can stay of reference. I think it's a challenge to us as a country to make sure that the positions of our governments, our representatives, are in support of the people who fight for freedom in countries like Zimbabwe, the British colony, and in countries like South Africa next door, where democracy is not as beautiful as we hoped it would be at the end of apartheid. I think there's a real call to make sure we understand the challenges for free journalism, for good, independent journalism. Look at the journalism in the UK, look at who owns the channels of our television, our radio stations, our newspapers, who owns them. We do not have a perfect free journalistic freedom of speech in the UK. And we need to be very mindful of that. This event is supported by our local paper, Southwark News, which is independently owned by people from this community. There are very few independently owned organs of the press. And thirdly, we all have personal responsibility, whether it's to support Amnesty International and support the cases of individual prisoners, whether it's to raise things in the press, or as a university, potentially, to seek to engage with the university in Zimbabwe, to support the students and the academics and freedom. Because clearly you've heard, the constitution in Zimbabwe is about to change to allow the president with the control of parliament to be able suddenly to give himself 7 more years from now with no election in power to be able to carry on the sort of regime. There are huge challenges for us. And I hope nobody will leave without thinking afterwards how we could follow up. And you're very welcome to engage either with me through my university email, chancellor at lsbu.ac.uk, with Paul, our vice chancellor, with Tara, our provost, or others, in ways where you think we may pursue that. And perhaps with the Students' Union, we can have a formal meeting to see how we can pick up the challenge from Blessed. So, quick, short questions, a few, and we'll take those. I'll take 3, and then Blessed, quick, short answers, please, so that we can maximize the opportunity. I see a hand here. Any other hands immediately? People who want to make a point or ask a question, please think whilst we do it. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Blessed, for your moving sharing of the moment.
Please give your name as you start.
Paul from Computer Science, Paul Cullen. If the arsonist owns the fire brigade, sometimes the 9999 is controlled by foreign countries, and they hang up, whether it's a wrong number. We had Amnesty International, we had a Zimbabwean refugee, and he described his journey to the border control officials, swimming across a river, stayed in prison, and they turned around and said, "We looked at the crocodile density, population density for that river, and there's no way you could have come across it, and they just rejected the application." And so that's the sort of thing that people work on this.
So what's your question, my friend? Do you want to ask a question?
It was more of a statement to the room, really, that we had the Mexican ambassador come and tell us, stop writing to our prisoners. So it has an effect. Individuals in this room can drive change by voicing their concerns to people who are connected with the regime.
Thank you. And bear in mind, there are 16 million people thereabouts who live in Zimbabwe. The lady at the back, yes, please. Can you speak as loudly as possible and give us your name?
Hi, I'm Celestia. Thank you so much for all the speakers. If you do here now, what are some things that you have done or are doing to feel more at home?
In the UK, whilst Blessed's in the UK. Okay, what are people doing and what could we do to make you feel more at home? And the third question or contribution, yes, ma'am.
I'm Chica, and again, thank you for sharing that experience with us today. I want to know, what would you like us, UK, handle? How would we support you, your people at home in Africa and Zimbabwe?
Thank you. Blessed, if you can pick up those 3 points quickly, and then we'll do another round before I have to love you and leave you and you need to move next door. Yes.
Yeah, no, thank you. So look, there's only so much people can do, right? There's only so much people can do because people in their personal lives are already suffering. But organizations like Amnesty International have been very helpful to me. This university has also welcomed me and has been very helpful to me. In fact, they are one of the reasons why I'm here, because they invited me when I was in South Africa to be able to get my visa to come and speak here. And these are some of the small things that have been done, to help. And if you listen to my speech, I did thank the British citizens who are also making sure that I'm not as malnourished as I was in prison. I'm being fed, and I still have a roof over my head. But it is the future that concerns me. It is my future that concerns me. What do I do from now? How do I continue to be useful to my country? And how do I continue to be useful to myself without burdening other people who continue to give me donations? Yeah. So I have been having conversations with a number of universities to try and look for a scholarship so that I can finish my law degree and be able to be self-sustaining and be able to be a citizen who can contribute. But critically, to be a citizen who can be able to return home to Zimbabwe and make a difference to my country. Because I'm not here because I want to stay here forever. I'm here because I want to be alive so that I can change my country for the better.
And let's stop you there. Take 3 last points. At the end of the meeting, if people want to, please engage directly with Blessed and take email addresses or so on, or with his friend Taka, who's doing the filming, or with Trisha, who's supporting him. So get their details and make sure that the conversation can continue after now if you want to personally. So any additional points people want? Madam, yes.
My name is Martina. I'm from Southampton University. So I want to know, as I know you said something about the education sector and what they're going through. So as an educator or as educators, what can we do to support the education system in Zimbabwe as our own 2 cents that we can contribute?
Thank you. We may have a conversation that can continue with South Bank Sixth Form. So 2 more last points before we adjourn. Any other? Yes, Madam. Yes.
I want to learn. I'm a women's element, and I want to learn I want to say that if we were in normal times, that we could be fascinating as a particular that's in Zimbabwe, I feel like British citizens right now. What you're talking about the importance of the legal system being independent. Right now, it's under threat here in the country. I've been a suspected terrorist. I don't want to belittle your experience, but I hope I'm not the only person in the room that's quite worried about what you feel now.
And the last point, is there any additional last point? Yes, please, sir.
Yes. If I was to stand
Just tell us who you are.
Yeah, if I was to stand there.
No, tell us who you are.
Oh, my name is Yoni Sise. I'm a school teacher at the chemistry at South Africa. I'm from Sierra Leone. And if I was to stand there and deliver a speech, you would charge me for plagiarism because people have been all right. Well, one of the things that you actually mentioned, and you talked about the global village, you talked about the diaspora, and what I want you to tell us is how the diaspora itself could actually come together and work. It's not just about Zimbabwe. There are many countries in Africa that are doing the same thing. Probably the personal aspect is different, but the issues are the same. How do we as a community in the diaspora come together and then arrest these kind of issues in the UK?
Thank you, that's very clear. I'm going to, in the second, run away and hand over to Tara to take my place here, because I have an engagement with the judicial system in this country. Not the criminal system. And can I just say 2 last things I do? I understand the point about the UK. We have to be very careful about the civil liberties in the UK. There are parties who are now making it their policy, who have as their policy that we should leave the European Convention on Human Rights, and therefore that the external supervision of our human rights should be removed. And I hope nobody in the room will support them in any way, or any party or politician who makes that point. And lastly, the next in this series will be in the autumn, and the person who I've asked to come to speak is the person who's currently the Minister for Prisons in the UK, and a very well-known entrepreneur, James Timpson, very eminent individual. And therefore there will be a similarity conversation. I'm going to hand over to Tara. Thank you all. Tara will manage Blessed, and I will catch up with you, Blessed and Tucker, and Tricia in a few minutes. Thank you, Tara, very much.
Thank you.
And
Thank
you
you,
all for coming.
Simon. Thank you. Is there another question or point, and then we can convene and have an informal chat with Blessed and friends over some refreshment? But I take your point as last one. Sorry, can you speak up? Happy. Okay.
So I know one of the reasons why we were doing this speech is to make a change or to so my question to you is one of the ways where we can make that change or impact what we talk about is by raising awareness. So I'm just wondering if there are resources, website where we can access so that we can share the story with our students,
Okay.
other members of the community, so we can create more awareness and change. Even we can start by that baby steps for things to.
Amazing. My short responses would be one of the most important things that this diaspora can do, and not only the diaspora but everyone, is solidarity. There's nothing as powerful as solidarity, and where there's solidarity, those who are facing oppression in their homes will have the strength and will to keep fighting. Because at the moment, without solidarity, people stop fighting, right? And on the issue, as you speak about the civil liberties in the UK and how they're under threat, you know, you read the news and you go on social media and you listen to the news. The people in the UK do not know that one day they might be the ones looking for asylum in other countries. You have been so comfortable in your lives that you do not think that one day you will be the ones running away from your country. And what you speak of right now is pointing to that. Because where you don't have an independent judicial system and your judiciary has been attacked, those in power can arrest you at will and keep you in prison. There's nothing as painful as being a prisoner of conscience, knowing that all your life you have been a law-abiding citizen, you have contributed your taxes and everything, but you are in prison for no offense. So it is therefore important, as you feel these pains today, to stand in solidarity with those who are suffering them, so that you also one day do not go through them. Right? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Perhaps you can join me in thanking Blessed again for a very inspiring talk. For those who can say there is some refreshment just through the door there, and I'm sure Blessed will be happy.